Okay, well, ladies and gentlemen, it's nice to see you again. Thank you for your patience. It often takes me a little bit to get everything ready here, but I think that today's video is going to be a long one, and I'm happy about that. I've been preparing and meditating and doing all the things. Today's episode, we are going to be discussing Uranus in Taurus. What's the nature of Uranus? What's the nature of Taurus? What is the implied generational, social meaning of this transit as it relates to all of us in a universal way? And then we're going to get into the specifics of what it means to the individual. So thank you. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you to my friends who are hanging out with me, anybody who's watching right now. This is a live stream podcast, folks, so if you feel like making any comments, asking any questions relating to your specific sign or to anything that you read or watch here, feel free to send me a question on the live chat and everybody will see it and I'll speak to it as much as I can. Now, let's get into it here a little bit, folks. So I've got a little presentation prepared for us. As I said, we're going to talk a little bit through this presentation, talking about Uranus and Taurus in general, what Uranus is all about, etc. Then we're going to kind of get into the individual readings. Now, having Uranus and Taurus, now is a good time to solidify, explore, and viscerally understand and unchink and unkink, or kink up, your sexuality and feelings of confident sexual validity, which attracts abundance. We're going to talk a lot about today about how the second house is, we've always heard that it means like our abundance, our capacity to attract abundance, and how this kind of operates is that it relates to what we intrinsically are. Something at a deep root of ourselves, that second house type of root. And it deeply relates to how our sexuality expresses in our visceral experience in the world, which is something that is typically hard to define because it relates so much with our upbringing. Let's talk a little bit about this, So there's a big sort of movement happening right now in the world relating to sexuality, transgenderism. Everybody is trying to figure out what their internal relationship to what the idea of a gender is. And there are many different ways of expressing this genderness, You might think that it's just all about the body. In a lot of ways, if you are that type of person, then maybe it does. We're going to talk in this video about how if you're a man, then you have to learn how to express masculinity and own your masculinity in the leadership of what you want to do, because that is the 10th house from your sun. Taurus is the 10th house from Leo, is what I mean there. So, sorry, I'll simplify that. You as a man, if you are a man, need to relate to your masculinity and to express it with confidence. This will attract abundance because especially if it relates to the nature of what you are. A man doesn't have to try hard to be a man. It just is of itself so. But what a man does have to try hard to do, if it's so natural to express masculinity, it's good for a man in that case to learn to express femininity as well. How do you not push so hard? How do you bring abundance with the flick of the wrist, where the people close to you support you? The loved ones around you want to support your leadership and direction. The only way you can do that is if you own it, but also give receptivity to those who want to support your leadership. It's the feminine side complementing the masculine. Now, for people who identify as female in their physical body, you have to find out what it is that you can use within your sexuality to bring you an intrinsic sense of abundance with this flick of the wrist mentality. How do I just unfurl that which my body already is and has been in childhood so that I can relate to puberty, I can relate to the natural attraction of my gender? So this is gender is a huge thing as relates to how you garner self-worth. I guess I should finish that. The idea with the female is that you need to know where your leadership counts as a woman and where your leadership involves you following or in your own way leading. Every woman has a sun in their chart, and Taurus is in the 10th from a woman's Leo as well. I wonder if you guys, we'll get into, as we get into this video, we're going to talk about how Taurus is in the 10th house from Leo, which means that Taurus provides the platform upon which Leo is expressed. The only way that we can express our self, our creativity in a lived way is if we can relate to our sexuality, to what we intrinsically are, because that's a huge part of how we express ourselves in the world in an attractive way. If you aren't a gender, if you don't express any gender, then there will be nobody with an opposing relational compensatory gender to deal through, to be attracted to that. Now, this is a very binary discussion that we're having here. In today's time, there's something very interesting going on with Uranus and Taurus, because everybody is trying to, there's a deep theme related to sexuality unfolding in today's time. The transgender issue, homosexuality and bisexuality, and even the third gender, the third pronoun as they, them. What does this mean with regard to my ability to be a man when I need to be a man, or when I need, or to be a woman, to be feminine, to be receptive, to be listening when I need to do that in relate as being a man, right? Now, I identify as a man in a man's body, but I'm like non-binary, and this recent transit has made me realize that there are times when I don't need to be a leader all the time. Sometimes leading by the receptivity of listening to others is deeply intrinsically important to me. But what's been very important to me, I've recently gotten a girlfriend. I've learned to lead in my relationship, and my partner supports that. And this has helped me in regards to expressing myself as a Leo rising. So this is an example of the type of consciousness that we're talking about today. And we're going to get into it more as we go along. This is what Taurus is all about. And of course, Uranus relates to an intuition of that which is beyond form. Male and female being form. If we are male some places, female in other places, what is the intrinsic non-binary intuited center for all these forms? This is what Uranus is teaching us, is to be non-binary, but also express our binary when it's appropriate, right? Even a non-binary person has to be male and female in some ways in life in order to get around. You could be like me and not finally identify with any of those poles, but you still need to express the form. It's the tricky thing that Uranus is teaching us today. So a lot of people who are identifying as non-binary and escaping from their own sense of leadership, the masculine, as well as escaping from a sense of being willing to support others and to trade. This is what the second house is. It's an energetic exchange. It's Venus. I have an intrinsic value and you have an intrinsic value, and they have form. They have had form in our childhood, going back all the way to puberty, because Taurus relates to age 7 to 14. And whatever sexuality and gender we try to express in puberty has led up to today, where we can build on that in our relationship with the world in a way that has this compensation, this yin to the yang, this relatability. And if you had trouble around 7 to 14 dealing with puberty, dealing with being a hormonally acceptable, accepting your hormonal structure, relating to others through gender and sexuality and what can make you attractive, then you might have a good time with Uranus and Taurus. But if you haven't, then now is a time for you to examine how adopting An appropriate sense of gender in every moment can bring you a rich sense of abundance by what you are intrinsically in the world of your business, specifically how you relate to others in your resources, because the second house is part of the earth triangle that relates to career and resources and habits and what have you. So that was a good little roundup. Now I want to talk a little bit about what Taurus is all about. My friend Brutus has asked, why is having no gender expression a problem? So the reason is, it's a good question. It seems to me that anybody who identifies as not having a gender still comes through with gender. And if you identify as having no gender, then that's a beautiful thing. Again, I really do in a lot of ways. But I have made the space for both not having a gender, but also having a gender when it's appropriate. So those non-binary people who have taken upon themselves to not express through a gender, having no gender expression, that's half the battle. You're already taking on the lessons that Uranus and Taurus is trying to teach. But if you cannot appropriately express a sense of gender in the sense of leadership, in the sense that I am worthy of where I'm going, when that's appropriate, that's an engendered sense of leadership. And if you don't consider that a gender, then you might be doing the right thing. The important point is that if you don't express a gender, you shouldn't let your intrinsic sense of that identity block opportunities that are presented to you in the world. Where if you say, I'm non-binary, so I am not the type of person to initiate anything, which is, you might not even say that. That might even sound silly. But if you are the type of person who does that, who says, I don't identify as masculine, I don't want to be toxic masculine, so I'm not just going to throw myself at somebody with everything that I'm so valued. I've got these things that I can relate to and that have value. And when I talk to my boss, I'm not going to tell my boss that I have value and just throw it in their face because I'm not a man and so I don't do that kind of thing. If you think that way, it's not a good thing. I'm not saying that you do. Any non-binary person, non-gender expression person can get around in the world just as well as anybody. But the point is to use gender. If you're non-binary, use this sense of gender to give you some fling, some elasticity, some attractiveness in the way that you operate in the world. And it might give you abundance, because then you have to work less because you have something which is already attractive to the opposite pole, because opposites do attract. At least in the moment appropriateness of gender. So it's not a bad thing to have no gender in your expression, but it is a bad thing to ignore opportunities in the world because you are stuck on an idea of your gender. This is what this transit is trying to tell us. Now, why is relatability predicated on gender? My friend Brutus has given us some great stuff. He's asking, why is relatability predicated on gender? The reason is because every attribute in reality tends to be expressed through a polarity. For example, big is big because small is small. Up is up because down is down. Down makes up what it is. Up makes down what it is. It's these interrelationships that add almost a magnetism by their polarity. It's like the north and south ends of a magnet. And this increases viability in the same way that like we have a first house and a seventh house relationship. Any first and seventh relationship is like opposites, but the opposites compensate for each other. Where the first house attribute is this way, the seventh house attribute is the opposite, but they complement each other by that oppositeness. And so this is why this relates to relatability. If I am a leader, somebody who is not necessarily someone who in their childhood psychology never intended to consider leadership as an important part of their dynamic as they relate to everybody else, they might think that supporting is something that's easier for them. They might even find leadership in their ability to support me as a leader. But if I'm a leader and I'm directing and I'm saying this is where we're going in our relationship, and the other person says, no, I think we should go this way, well, then they might just have to go separate ways, won't they? Unless I'm a leader and someone supports my leadership by following me and trusting me in my leadership, in my initiation of actions, then there's no relatability because there's no yin to the yang. There's just two yangs and they won't have an attractive relationship. In the same way as if I find somebody who's just looking for someone to support in their leadership, I could find that person and we could relate that way. I hope this answers your question a little bit, Brutus. But when I say, gender, it doesn't necessarily mean male and female. I'm relating it more to yin and yang. The psyche of Taurus talks about gender, but really the psyche of the second house is more about having dynamics with which you can compensate your own nature that you've developed through childhood and that you relate as an intrinsic value of yours. How you can relate whatever that is to others in a way that is mutually compatible. This attracts abundance because then by just being what you naturally are and inherently are, you don't have to work as hard. Because you're already attracting what you're looking for by knowing that you are the thing that you are. So, I feel like I could go on about this particular conversation forever. It's good fodder for thought, and I think I might digest it more now that my friend Brutus has asked me about it. So thank you, Brutus, for the questions. I feel like I should keep going on. We've given a little bit of lip service to what we're talking about in terms of gender. I feel like as we go on in this conversation, we're going to unfold a little bit more of what we mean by this and how it relates to us as individuals. So, once again, thank you, Brutus, and anybody else. If you have a question, feel free to ask. Now, the generality of the Uranus and Taurus transit is that community, Taurus as well as Uranus relate to community, but it's community and it's technology. Uranus relates to Aquarius, as they say, in 11th house ideas, organizations outside of ourselves, and also just intuition, humanitarian, eternally, periodically returning human interests. This relates to Uranus. It's like no matter what time you're in, the people in medieval times could still intuit the nature of astrology. The people in the Vedic age who didn't even have telescopes could still intuit the mysteries of what astrology means. Uranus was working through them at a technological, metaphysical layer. Even though history hadn't unfolded to show them what astrology is and means. Uranus brings this kind of intuition, no matter where it's placed. In the sense of Taurus, it relates to an intuition of, again, how we can all relate to attracting abundance through our sexuality as a physical body. Taurus. not just our sexuality, but also our abundance is more, like abundance is more intrinsic to Taurus than sexuality. Sexuality is an exponent of abundance and attraction. That's an important point. So in general, I will say you should, if this transit is important to you, and we're going to talk about what makes this transit important to you, I would look up Tantra. Tantra, what it means, how it relates to yourself, how your relationship with lovers or with your lover, with your husband or wife, can bring about an understanding of your sexuality, which you can experience in a visceral way that will allow you to relate to energy exchanges outside of your private bedroom, like with your boss. When your boss comes to you and says, I have a job for somebody who could do it, if you have that intrinsic capacity to say, oh, you know I'm the person. I've been the person. Because you've been the person in your energy exchanges, relationships with what you do in the privacy of your own bedroom. Now when your boss comes to you and asks you about having some kind of relationship where they're probably the leader and you're the follower, then you've got to relate as the follower, as the supporter. But maybe your boss might say, I have chosen you to be a leader of a bunch of people. Then you have to be at the same time supporting them, being the feminine to their masculine, but also being the masculine to the feminine of those who are supporting you. I'm relating masculine and feminine in this sort of like male is the leader, woman is the follower. But of course, I mean that is an intrinsic relationship of yin to yang. Yang being like spring and summer, and then yin being the autumn and winter that follows it. You could really switch them around because, as we all know a woman in our lives who has just as much, if not more, capacity to be a proper good leader in whatever field they are than any man that you could ever find. Of course, we're talking about the archetypes here and not biological gender, because as this whole transit is teaching us is that biological gender doesn't exactly cinch how you ought to relate in the world. It's how you as an individual relate to all of this. If you can learn to communicate and effectively share your energy field with others, you can empower your psyche in personal financial business and second house related matters. Second house is funny because it's related to our business and the outside world, the 10th house and the 6th house, what we do, but it's also like what we are. It is the secure foundation of what we are, which reflects in all of our business. The second being related to those, the 10th and 6th. And these themes relate to what Taurus means to all of us. How we each conceive of this tantric inner sexual flow expressing outwardly with others depends on what house Taurus is to the ascendant, as well as what house it is to the sun, to Leo. In this, of course, Taurus is always the 10th house from Leo. And we're going to talk about that. You're going to see what I mean when we pile them all together. Now, before we get into this, I thought that I was on another thingy-dingy. For some reason, I'm not getting all my pictures in here. Well, isn't that special? Here we go. Alright, I see what's going on. You'll have to excuse me for one sec, folks. There. Okay, I hope you guys are enjoying this. I'm just checking out more of our comments. I can see that we don't have any more. So I'm going to continue jabbering and yammering. Now, what is the sun in relation to Uranus? I'm going to build a picture for you all now of what we call musical chairs. Everybody knows the game of musical chairs. Basically, you've got 4 chairs and 5 people. You can see there's 4 purple chairs and 5 people want to sit in these chairs, okay? The continuing the game is the sun. Playing the game, because the music is always playing. Uranus is the intrinsic energy structure of metaphysical philosophy that exists and permeates all time. So the music is always playing. But you might not jump in the music and be a part of the game. What you have to do as the sun is get in relationship with the music. So I worded this as don't stop the music, but it's more about like stay in the game. Okay? Now the sun is your capacity to keep playing this game no matter how many times you get outed by Saturn, by someone else's desire to get your chair. You are the sun, and you just want to play this game and have an ambition for your own expression, but you must find a place in the world with Saturn for how you can stand alone in your field to express and even to be challenged to channel the potentialities of your sun. Now, what happens with Saturn is that Saturn is a negative pull. Saturn is a responsibility in a certain place. When you get this next big job, if you have a very good Saturn, then the boss will always give you a higher position and a new position. Or at least Saturn will give you a position that's good and responsible, reliable, and is kind of antagonistic to the sun. Saturn has to ground the sun with something that is kind of a sacrifice. In order for you to express your sun best, you kind of have to run into Saturn head first a little bit. And Saturn has to eliminate some of the possibilities of your sun. Saturn has to eliminate the pure potential of the sun in order to make a specific expression of it. Uranus is what happens when musical chairs, the musical starts playing again, right? Saturn is what happens when the music stops playing and you find a chair. You go and you sit down, right? I wonder if you guys can see what I'm saying. Oh my gosh, I thought you guys could see what I was looking at. Whatever. Here's musical chairs. You have 4 chairs, 5 people. Each one of them wants to sit down. Saturn is what happens when everybody sits down in a chair. Everybody sits down, and you might have accidentally outed your friend. Sucks to be your friend because your relationship with your spiritual potential is yours. So you have to fight to express it sometimes. Just like in puberty, if you want to if your sun wants to express itself, it has to either, whether it's in class, you have to express your leadership to come up to the front of class and say, I'm leading this group in this fun thing. No one else, does anybody else want to do it? We can do it together. And that, that's like you and another friend sitting on the chair. But if nobody else takes that, then it's only you and your friend that have sat on those chairs. Saturn is a spot, a slot, a place in the world. And what happens when we invoke Uranus is that no matter how comfortable we get in any spot in life, there's always more music. There's always a deeper relationship between the sun and Saturn that you can express, where you have this pure solar potentiality to keep moving and keep getting to a higher state for the sake of your own ambition, and to channel it in a role, in a constructive role, that's again Saturn, pulling all the possible potentials into one form. But that one form can always find better expression through the totality of the chart, and that's what Uranus is. Wherever Uranus is, it's a part of your life where you might have to let go of whatever spot you've come to through Saturn. Gosh, I hope you guys can see this good. Whatever spot you've come to through Saturn, you have to let go of certain things in order to listen to the music. Because if you just stay in your spot, Uranus is going to come along and say, hey, the music's playing. You have to keep moving. You can't just hold your belt and then retire after one battle. You have to keep holding that belt. So this is a good little roundup of what all of this means, okay? The sun is a fixed, constant stream of inspired energy induction. Our psyche's control over our pure potential. When the sun is good, then our psyche knows that whatever we do is a game where we're trying to express ourselves. And when Saturn comes along, and says you need to be put into this role, the sun can understand that this is a more of my performance. I'm a Leo rising, and I always like to say every performance is just a rehearsal for the next one. It's the sun that has that consciousness. And if you fail or if you succeed, you got to always know that it's always building on what you are as the sun. Saturn is the one who comes along and says, well, you failed here and you failed here and you got to try harder. Because how do you know that you've really expressed your potential except by some kind of game, some kind of observation of your potential in the sense of the world? It's relating to how others relate to you. So this relates to your 10th house. This relates to Saturn and where Saturn is in your chart and how healthy the relationship is to Saturn and the sun. Saturn represents the limits and traumas of life, which act as girders, pathways, or channels for the constant drive at the material level to produce sun energy towards specific progressive goals and ambitions in the world, which is going to give you a specified use of your sun energy and feel satisfying. Feel satisfying in the sense that you're expressing something, but also that you're building towards something in the world. Saturn helps us to build the pure potential of the sun towards something that is refined. And it's always tough. But if you have a good Saturn, you'll give it up freely for this or that responsibility, this or that job that your boss gives you. You'll just feel like, yeah, that's a good opportunity for me to express my sun and to serve. Because Saturn is all about serving at a deep, compassionate level. Now, Uranus is considered to be Saturn's father, actually. According to Greek myth, Saturn robbed his father, Uranus, of the dominion of the world. Let's just think about this for a moment. In the old Greek myths, Uranus at first ruled the world, and it ruled everything. Because again, Uranus permeates all time infinitely as the metaphysical energy grid, as is the nature of consciousness. Consciousness has a psyche, and it always expresses some kind of psyche. It has spiritual, astrology has intrinsic spiritual evolutionary cycles, which suggest an evolutionary curve upwards into more refined and succinct states of self-expression. We can all have that. All of our karmas, what they are now, can be expressed at through an evolutionary state. Uranus is this metaphysical grid of this ladder of evolution that each soul has the capacity to find. Saturn is the world. So it's interesting that in the ancient Greek myth, Uranus wanted to rule the world. And it did. It was there first. But Saturn came along and said, no, the psyche needs to experience a time-bound genetic materium of progressing evolutionary at the biological genetic level towards the attainment of the implied metaphysical evolutionary grid that Uranus represents. You could think that you're in Uranus all you want. You could think that you have Kundalini rising all you want. But if you haven't done the work, if you haven't done some diligent evolutionary growth at all the baser chakra levels, at the grosser levels of your own astrology chart, and found the balance between all these things in yourself, then you're not going to be able, you won't express Uranus. You need Saturn to be the bowl that holds Uranus. And this is why Uranus is Saturn's father in the Greek mythos. It's an inherent capacity in us to see our infinite individual power beyond the girders of Saturn. It is our present state. You need to somehow see what you are now, see the intuition of what is your highest self, or the highest expression of what you are, And then you have to find a way to bridge that gap between what you are as Saturn and how you can stably and reliably channel some kind of energy expression in the world that will bring you closer to what Uranus is, which is this infinite expression, this intuition. And the only way to get there is through the sun. Your power grid, your energy field, is what powers the distillation of Saturn into the pure potential of Uranus. The sun is the will to use this thing in a balance and to build towards your highest self. Uranus pushes in from the world to embody the sun over and above what has thus been known through Saturn and experienced through Saturn. And this gives Saturn a higher vantage for the sun to grip. It's almost like Uranus completely gives you a vision of how everything you've been doing in your life is limiting. Is not giving you the tangible rewards you want. And Uranus, related to wherever it is in your chart, is showing you that at this moment, this area is crystallized and is blocking your fullest ascent to what the sun and everything in your chart represents, but particularly the sun. Uranus is an adjunct to the sun, and it uses Saturn as this sort of three-tiered evolutionary tug of war. And that is the reason why we put so much emphasis on how Uranus relates to the sun and to Leo in each individual chart, as we get along to expressing Uranus in all the signs. So, in our game of musical chairs, the sun is our capacity to endure the pressure to compete against others and to meet Saturn's demands. The sun is just our capacity to play the game and to keep playing at something, no matter how many times you fail. Saturn represents our ability to keep one eye firmly locked on one of those chairs. I'm going to find a specific spot. I'm enjoying just playing the game as the sun. You know, a Leo rising with no Saturn is just going to enjoy creating. Tra-la-la-la-la. Here's my sweet little creation. It's so intrinsically important and special to me. But if there's no Saturn, then Saturn, the world, humans, are coming from the ground up. And humans see visually this game of chairs. And you might see a Leo or some person who's got all this pure potential and they're so great and they got all this things. But what people really watch is the people who are competing and winning in a fair game to show who is really ambitious to express the highest potentials of their sun. That's what Saturn is doing. Saturn is that one chair, that one spot. So your Saturn represents your ability to keep one eye firmly locked on one of those chairs, one slot, some bigger place. Uranus is the moment when you are forced to get out of that chair, allow the competitors to rearrange their positions and status, to keep climbing to personal heights despite stale security. That's why usually at some point halfway through life, everybody gets their Uranus opposition. It's the midlife crisis vibe. And this is about 40 years old, where Uranus is meeting the opposite point from where it was in your chart. And now you have to, this relates to its sign, house, and aspects, and all these things. But at that point, you have to relate to the fact that how you've been developing your reliability and security with Saturn probably will have excess stagnant energy in some way or another. And Uranus, at any moment where Uranus kicks in to transform something important in the chart, it shows that the way that you've tried to grip a reliable security as relates to what Saturn means, the way in which you've tried to reliably secure whatever that is, has gotten stale. There's too much Saturn in it. There's too much of a firm grip on everyone seeing that you're at this great place. And that grip on a high place on the mountain is what got you to that high place on the mountain, and it's important. But this is just the nature of energy. No matter how high you've climbed, when you're about 40 years old, you have to be able... Uranus is always telling you, okay, erase everything, but keep the best of what you've come from so far. The best metaphor for Uranus is an old Indian phrase that says, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. If you're 40 years old, you have to wash the baby, which means you have to wash your life. Wash all the things that aren't serving you anymore. But if you're washing a baby, you don't want the precious aspects of who you've become so far to get swept in the tide of the dirt that you're throwing away. You need to be diligent and find out, how can I take what I've been, where I've come to, and use it to further increase my needs in my life while still retaining Saturn within. Because if you have a good Saturn within, even if you fall off the mountain is not the mountain climber. Everyone mistakes Saturn for the mountain. You've climbed this mountain and now you have to hold on to this desperate position. Any good Capricorn, any person with a strong Saturn will tell you, I could lose it all right now and I could bring it all right back because Saturn is in me. I've been developing it consistently all this time. Even when Uranus comes and sweeps through, it's like, oh, thank God. It's always tough because you have to let go of a lot of things that you've firmed up, and it will always be tough. But if you have a good Saturn, and especially a good Sun, it will take a good Sun to keep playing the game. And if you don't have a good Sun and a good Saturn, then when Uranus wipes it all apart, not having a good Sun means that you've ignored your Sun all this time. You've been doing Saturn for Saturn's sake and not enlivening yourself with it. And Uranus will tell you that this is all Saturn. You need to remove it all and keep the best of your Saturn, keep the best of the position and the glory you've held, but now you got to start bringing your Sun into it because you've been ignoring that. Because Uranus relates so succinctly to the Sun. Yes. So, that was a whole lot of all of that. So I hope you guys are digging this. Chiron is a huge bridge to what Uranus is. I don't necessarily... Okay, so Brutus has said, number one, so again, it's a commenter has noted that Saturn is experience, in other words. That must have been relating to what I was saying, and I would say yes. In a lot of ways, Saturn relates to our earthly experience. But you could really, there's a lot of ways that you could describe experience per se. The whole thing is experience. But Saturn does relate to our past in a lot of ways. And what we've done so far, what we've built on in our experience and knowledge in order that we can go farther in life. Now Brutus has also said, isn't Chiron, he's asked, isn't Chiron the bridge to Uranus? And I believe that that is deeply true, especially as relates to compassion, transcendental compassion. Brutus is asking me some great questions. So first of all, Chiron is, in a lot of ways, it's the bridge to Uranus because it takes a certain service in the world to tap into the intuition of Uranus, because you need to have that transcendental compassion in order to go through tough experiences in a lot of ways. Saturn, I would say, also deeply relates to that. I'm not an expert on Chiron, I have to admit, but I think that this idea of Chiron as being an important bridge to what Uranus is important, and it does have something. There is something intrinsic there. But I also say that Chiron is not one of the main planets of astrology, and it's working in you. So whatever goes on with Chiron is going to help you achieve what Uranus is trying to teach you. Now, Brutus has said, this musical chairs paradigm is based on competition, not just play. Is spiritual unfoldment dependent on this? So if you're out of the game early, what do you do? Jump off a bridge? Well, the thing is that you could relate this to your own sense of art. Let's say musical chairs is your own, for a Pisces, this game of musical chairs for a Pisces rising. This is somebody who develops capacities to express something, a piece of art, and then they go around and they want to express another piece of art. And they want the next piece of art to be more intrinsic to the unfoldment of their soul than the last one. And if it's not, then the last one has kind of beaten them in the game of musical chairs. There's a natural and evolutionary refinement in every person, which this whole system is trying to express. So competition per se this competition can be an internal one. It's the Uranus future best potentials of the self competing against the sun's present capacity to unfold its potentials. And Saturn is kind of a medium, a vessel for which the sun it has to let go of its rigidity sometimes, but also it has to express this rigidity. There's a perfect expression of the sun, and it's in Uranus is the idea of that highest expression. So when it comes to competition in this sense, in your spiritual evolution, it doesn't mean that you have to compete in the world. It means that you have to compete with the gross unconscious karma of your own unaware spirit and your lack of self-realization for how to best express what you are. If you're getting on top of that, then you're playing the game of musical chairs. I hope that makes sense, Brutus. Feel free to keep asking me questions because you're asking me some good ones. Now, we're already quite far into this, and we're only just starting to get a grip on where we're at. But like I said, I knew this would be a long video, so I'm going to go to the bathroom really quick, folks. And when I come right back, we're going to continue talking about Uranus in Taurus in particular now. We've talked a bit about Sun, Saturn, Uranus. Now let's get into our main conversation about Uranus in Taurus. I'm going to the bathroom first. I'll be back. Guys got to see the true reality of my PJ pants. Usually when I'm here at my desk, it's like all like, oh cool, stuff happening, shirt, all this stuff looks great. I'm wearing PJ pants underneath. Comfort where it counts, folks. Okay, one more thing from my friend Brutus before we move on to Uranus and Taurus. Taurus says that I'm assuming progress, that there is some kind of spiritual sense of progress. And he has noted that Uranus explodes any sense of progress altogether. Or he's asking, does Uranus not explode progress altogether? If Saturn is progress, doesn't Uranus upend this? I would say Saturn is the vessel of progress, for good, better, or for worse. Saturn is karma. And the sun is the energy and the capacity of the energy field to use the karma in a way which gives spiritual progress, which leads towards Uranus. Uranus is, in a sense, spiritual progress. You cannot assume that Uranus deletes the memory of the positive evolution that your soul has found. Uranus upends and explodes the progress that Saturn in the world has expressed. That's getting to the top of the mountain. But like I said, Saturn is within you. If you've been developing a good Saturn, Uranus will upend the worldly progress you've made, but not the spiritual progress. Uranus is always progressive in the way that Aquarius is. And being progressive means you need to often let go of what is not progressive, like Saturn and present states of karma. But the spiritual evolution does continue. Ideally. Sometimes Uranus just completely eliminates all of the worldly progression that you've made, but that's usually only if you have a bad Saturn. If you've made it to the top of a mountain and you have a bad Saturn, Uranus will come when you're about 40 years old, wipe out the mountain that you've found yourself on. You might have a great fall from glory, and it might bum you out so much that you never climb another mountain again. But usually it'll mean that you've just got another mountain to climb with the wisdom that you've gained in your life. So, it's crazy stuff, intense stuff to talk about. But it's always the way it is when we're dealing with the metaphysical concepts of spiritual evolution in astrology. Now, well, Brutus, so I can see the questions you've asked. I hope it makes sense what I've said. And I believe that I've answered your question here. If you feel like I haven't, feel free to keep asking questions. I might just have to get 2 more questions as we continue in this discussion, and I'll try to speak to any questions that haven't been spoken to so far. Okay? I hope that makes sense. Because we have to continue with this, or else I'll never get it done. We have lots to talk about. Now, Uranus transits are bound to be experienced by everyone at some point. Some people have Uranus close to a natal planet or a cusp, meaning that the point in question involves Uranus energy whenever anything affects that point, the planet or the cusp, by transit or dasha. Can you guys see what I'm reading? Good. Such people will have a hard time in early life dealing with that point, but eventually they'll likely be well suited for the dissolving-resolving cycle of Uranus on the whole, particularly in relation to the planet or cusp point that Uranus is with. Really, what it all comes, the health of one's ability to deal with Uranus has to do with the Sun and Saturn again, but it also deeply has a lot to do with the house and lord of where your natal Uranus is. For example, I have Uranus in Capricorn. So, I have a good strong Saturn, which means that Saturn provides a vessel for me to build, and then it gets taken away from me. And then I rebuild, and then it's taken away from me. But I'm constantly, because I have a good Saturn, I'm okay. I have the compassionate sense to keep working towards all the things I do in my life. So that if these things keep dissolving, I'm still building on the sense that it's okay, keep the music playing. I know that I'm climbing towards my highest potential. I mean, I don't know, everyone's got their own tough things. Like, I've got some tough things about my Saturn. But I'm just trying to give you an example of the importance of the house and the house lord of your natal Uranus, and defining whether you can get used to this dissolving, resolving cycle. So, this next bit about what we're looking at is going to relate entirely to let me just digest this for a moment. Right. Okay. We've talked a little bit about Uranus and Taurus. We're going to get into it more. Before we do, what we're going to talk about now is how do you define whether there is something in your chart that will make this Uranus in Taurus transit significant. How do we define significance in the chart in general? This also relates to where we're at. So if you've ever wondered about that, now's your chance to get a little bit of a glimpse of it. I've already talked about this in my Prosperity of the Outer Planets series. Now, in order to get a real good sense of the significance, I recommend you check out Vault of the Heavens. Excuse me. Because Vault of the Heavens, in particular, will give you a sense of Jaimini Karakas and the Mahadashas in particular. Now, the Mahadashas are a very finicky thing. I ultimately recommend that you there's a software called Kala, or have somebody who uses Kala software to read your chart and to tell you what your Mahadasha periods are. Okay? Because there's the Mahadashas, that's these. And it's like periods of importance, as well as the dashas are periods of importance that are kind of like transits. We're going to see how a Uranus in Taurus transit can meet up with a dasha of Venus to have huge significance in this moment in life in your chart. As well as the Jaimini aspects of the Atmakaraka and Atmakaraka, particularly the Atmakaraka. So these are definers of significance, as well as we're going to talk about if you have a fixed sign on your rising sign, then Uranus and Taurus will be more significant. If Venus is conjunct the moon, the sun, or an important angular cusp, as we can see in this chart, this Venus here is in the 10th house, and it's right around the 10th house cusp. It's like right on the MC, as well as the sun. So there's lots going on there for that Venus. And Venus is channeling Taurus. You guys are going to start to see where I'm getting at with these. And in all these placements, Uranus and Taurus tends to be connected to themes that will lift the ground right out from under your feet in a disruptive, yet necessary and potentially refreshing way. Now let's just get a quick glimpse of what these are about. Uranus, Uranus and Taurus is not that significant for everybody. Truth be told, this whole gender thing, this binary thing, it's important for everybody. But relating to non-binary and gender expression and all this stuff that's a big theme while Uranus is in Taurus, it might not be that important to you if Taurus and Libra and Venus are not important in your chart. And if they don't have that much significance to you, if there's no important planets bringing out that significance, then Uranus and Taurus could just be a generational experience that just kind of floats by in a dull way. What we're doing right now is defining significance of Uranus and Taurus. Now, first thing we look for is if Venus is your Atmakaraka. So, I'm going to show you an example here, okay? So the Atmakaraka is the highest degree in your chart. This is my chart right here, if you'd be interested in checking it out. When I was born, Venus had the highest degrees in my chart out of any other planet. And Saturn had the lowest, and that's the Darakaraka. So since Venus was my highest degree in my chart, that means that Venus is my Atmakaraka. It's a signifier. It's the sole signifier. And this this is just as important as the sun to every person. So if Uranus is aspecting your Atmakaraka, if it's enshrined to it, or if your Atmakaraka aspects Uranus. But most particularly is that if you have Venus itself as your Atmakaraka, then Uranus and Taurus means a lot to you, as it means a lot to me. This is why I'm really getting a lot off of technology, off of my computer, off of all my things, communication, relating to community and organizations bigger than myself, the astrology world, and gender politics are going to be a huge thing in my coming career as a YouTuber, talking about it in this sort of way. So with all of this being said, Uranus and Taurus is huge to me. I've been learning, while Uranus is in Taurus, I've been learning things that relates to the deepest expression of what I am as a Venusian person. Venus is almost like itself is like the sun to me. It sucks that it's in Virgo, as I'm sure you can all see. But every planet has its ability to express to express some of the heights of its potentials, no matter where it's placed. Whatever house Taurus rules will be amplified for deeply amplified for a Venus Atmakaraka person. And this, for me, since I'm a Leo rising, this is my 10th house. Taurus is in my 10th house. So I've actually got 3 of the important things happening. It's awesome. It's crazy, and it's awesome. So Leo rising is a fixed sign. So Uranus and Taurus hold significance for me. Venus is my Atmakaraka. It's my highest planet. And since Taurus rules Venus, that also has significance to me. And then I was going to say also that, if you'll notice from the next, like down here, I'm actually in the Venus Mahadasha right now, which means that Venus holds, yes, even more pertinence to me right now, because I'm in a Venus period. Venus things are being amplified in order that I can learn important parts of myself that are going to be relevant for the next 120 years. This is Vimshotari, and we're going to talk about that basically in our next slide. For now, no matter what dasha I'm in, Venus is always important to me because Venus is the ruling planet in my chart. And so Uranus and Taurus is going to help me express my intrinsic self-fulfillment, my role in life, in a constant way that I can express my potentials, that it's going to affect me for the rest of my life, Uranus and Taurus. The things that I envision now, the experiences that I ecliptically, ecstatically throw myself at, I'm a very sexually explorative and wandering person in my life right now. And I want to channel it towards the best effect as befits my soul. And I'm enjoying deeply just exploring and just having fun with it. And there's also lots of potential for waste in this kind of situation as well. These are the kind of things that you want to be looking at. I hope to God you guys can see. Very good. Every now and then I got to make sure that you guys can see the picture that I'm looking at. So if you have Venus as your Atmakaraka, Uranus and Taurus is this 7 years of Uranus and Taurus is going to be giving you something deeply relating to everything that you are, your deepest sense of your self-expression. And how can you bring a delicious sense of your soul's fulfilling expression into your world right now, that in a way that will satisfy you for the rest of your life, depending on what Venus means in your chart. In my chart, in this case, being the 10th house and the 3rd house. It's the way of how I relate to the world through the 10th house, and also how I relate to my mind, to the explorations of my mind, and how willing I am to even push my information out to the world with confidence, knowing that I'm right on what I'm doing. It's kind of like how Leo gets about, as he derives authority from his own capacity to feel worthy of researching things that are useful to his career. 3rd house, 10th house emphasis. This is the way that you guys have to think about why Uranus and Taurus would be meaningful to you if Venus is your Atmakaraka. You have to relate it to the individual chart. This also shows the different ways that that significance can be derived from any transit. Now, let's look at if Uranus and Taurus is affecting your Mahadasha somehow. Now, this is particularly if you are presently in the Mahadasha of Venus, or a subdasha of Venus, then the meaning of Venus is amplified now very deeply. And your karma must permit Uranus to transit during this very impressionable time, which means that it's a crazy coincidence that it just so happens that at the time in your life when Venus was amplified in the Mahadasha, that you also had to experience Taurus, Uranus coming through Taurus. As we can see here, it's 2020 at present in this video. I was born in 1991, and my Venus Mahadasha started in 2003. And Venus's Mahadasha is the longest one. It lasts 20 years, which means that right now, until 2023, I'm living in a state of an amplified sense of Venus's importance to me. This is part of Vimshottari in Vedic sense. And that's what these dashas are. Vimshottari means 120 years. If you don't know what this is about, again, I just recommend looking it up on Vault of the Heavens Chart Creator. And try different things because it's finicky to find exactly how to measure this thing. But this is a system that is considered secondhand. It's considered just as important as transits. In fact, this is even more important than transits in the Vedic sense. This is something that the Western world is completely missing out on. And when outer planet transit relates to the Mahadasha that is ruling your chart at the present time, there's two levels of confluence that means something deep, deep, deep for the sign in question, as will be meaningful to your soul probably for the rest of your life until your next incarnation, relating to whatever the Mahadasha is under. Look at it this way. Fate has permitted all things Venus to be deeply relevant to your earthly experience for the extent of this Venus Dasha period. For whatever reason, this has occurred during Uranus and Taurus. Thus, whatever Taurus represents as a house will invoke themes of Uranus related to that house. Since Venus Mahadasha is 20 years or so, being one of the most important phases of the soul, fate has permitted Uranus to be involved with your Venus lessons, meaning that you had to experience Venus Mahadasha at some point in your life, in this life. If you're experiencing it now, it just so happens that Venus is going to ring necessarily with the expansiveness and the intuitiveness and the dissolution and the revolution of Uranus energy as relates to Taurus. It's a double emphasis. Painful and yet illuminating lessons related to Venus and whatever Venus represents as a house lord. For me as a Leo, it's the 3rd and the 10th house. And as you can see here, there's also subdasha periods. For example, my Sun/Venus period is happening in 2028. Now, I would have been going through the Sun period in that case, and the Sun was the most important thing in my life. Sun-Venus Dasha means how does the Venus relate to the Sun? And in this case, if this had occurred while Uranus was in Taurus, then we would have been asking, how does Uranus and Taurus relate to Venus, and how does Venus relate to the Sun? And all of this can give you a deep experience of how you can use your Sun at its best, if that was the big Dasha, the Mahadasha. Remember, Maha means great, like Mahatma Gandhi. Maha means great, and Atma means soul. So Maha means great. So therefore, if you are experiencing a Mahadasha, then you will be living through an amplified state of the planet in question. I should also say that if you're in the Mahadasha of a planet that's conjunct, let me just say this. If you are in the Mahadasha of a planet that relates to, that's conjunct Uranus, like let's say if you've got Uranus conjunct Mars, and you are in the Mahadasha of, no, I guess it's only if Uranus is conjunct Venus. If Uranus is conjunct Venus, then that means Venus is enlivened with this Uranus energy, and having Uranus in Taurus is going to specifically relate to Venus, because Uranus is being conjunct Venus in your chart. That's going to bring the Uranus things through when you experience a Venus Mahadasha. But generally, those experiencing Venus Mahadasha right now are going through some crazy things, for better or worse. So, so these two methods, Jaimini and the Atmakaraka, also Vimshottari in the Dasha periods, these represent a Neo-Vedic conception of how to deal with themes relating to the outer planets. This is Neo-Vedic in the sense of like New Vedic. In my experience, they are more relevant than anything that Western astrology can point to regarding the effects of the outer planets. These are the biggest ones, in my opinion, from everything that I've digested. These are the most meaningful and significant aspects that Uranus and Taurus can express for you. Although there's different ways. These are huge. These are the hugest ones, really. But if you have Uranus and Taurus, if Taurus is your ascendant, that is one which is just as meaningful as all of these. But in my earnest estimation, this is a bridge between traditional Vedic astrology, which doesn't really talk about the outer planets, and modern tropical Western astrology, which has no concept of dashas or karakas in Jaimini's sense. It's a crucial gap in these two wonderful systems, which I plan to further illuminate in coming videos, so stay tuned. As you can tell, I'm really just trying to get through these because I would love for anybody, feel free to email me or comment or tell me anything if you see that you are in any of this. If you have Venus as your Mahadasha, if Venus is your Atmakaraka, like me, just text, comment, just say something, and I would love to speak to it if I can. Same thing if you are in Venus Mahadasha during this period. And there's some big things happening for your soul at this moment that can give you a great opportunity for growth for the rest of your incarnation, possibly for incarnations to come. The next bits relate more to this incarnation. And that's partly why I want to express the importance of these ones that have come before. This is a multi-incarnational, important figure this time in your life. And what you learn about yourself as relates to your self-worth, your sexuality, and your ability to attract abundance, this is going to make this period, the tough things that happen, the realizations you make as relates to your fulfillment, are going to be important for your soul for incarnations to come. It's important stuff. Now, how else do we define if Uranus and Taurus is going to be important to you? Well, it's if you have a fixed ascendant sign. All the fixed ascendant signs will have significant shakeups related to their basic activity in life when Uranus is in Taurus. So that's Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, Aquarius. You can see here, this is the chart of a Leo. Oh, this is my chart again. Yes, sweet. So we have a Leo rising, and Taurus is in my 10th house. It has gone way past the cusp now, the cusp of the MC. But I still consider that so long as it's touching that cusp and moving in the 10th house in the equal house system from Leo, then Uranus in Taurus is significant. Uranus transiting an angle is always relevant to one's immediate experience because the angular houses are houses of action, foundation, and opportunity, and reaction. It's really our involvement in the world that maintains our energy field and our progression. So Uranus and Taurus will have a lot for you related to whatever house it's in as a fixed ascendant sign. And we're going to talk about that when we get to your individual sign. Now, this is something that we're not going to be able to discuss per se in the Uranus throughout the rising sign video, part of the video. This is just knowing about your Venus. If your Venus is conjunct the Sun, the Moon, or an important angular cusp, then that Venus is, right now, it's carrying Uranus's energy. Venus means something intrinsic to this whole person's chart, and they have to experience what it means to have Venus conjunct something as important as the Sun, and they have to learn how, whether for good or bad, depending on how Venus relates to the planet in question. Mind you, Venus doesn't do well with the Sun and the Moon. So if you have Venus conjunct the Sun, it means that you have to express Venus, but it's going to there's going to be some ugly sacrifice going on here. And it'll be related, you have to, at one hand, sacrifice a bit of Venus and what it means, but on the other hand, sacrifice a bit of the Sun for the sake of something that might seem wasteful, but is still important. Venus, for anyone whose Venus is conjunct the Sun, you're going to have to, in this period, you're going to have to learn how your sexuality and your ability to attract abundance and how you relate with others at what you intrinsically are can necessarily augments the expression of your leadership and your inspiration. You have to deal with this head on if you have Venus conjunct the Sun. And it's the same thing if you have Venus conjunct the Moon. In this case, the Moon is starving Venus with its egotism, and you have to learn how you can satisfy yourself and enjoy sexuality for its own sake, and enjoy business, enjoy finances, and deal with them at a business level without taking things personally. The Sun and the Moon have to learn this. For the Sun, Venus is going to challenge your ability to relate in business without an ego sense, without feeling like your authority is being challenged, but also playing with authority. Dealing with authority, but also being an authority in a way that doesn't reduce your self-esteem. The Moon is going to be the same thing. You have to relate with your relationships in a way that brings out the best of your sexuality and your ability to relate and your ability to be an independent individual while still relating with others. And you can't let your hunger for emotional wellness or emotional fulfillment or the foundation of your whole self to get in the way of business. If you have a wife who you're deeply emotional with, but you can't relate sexually with because you're afraid to tell them what you really feel, or that you have a leadership in your life that you want to move towards. You know, you got married to this partner who helps you financially or whatever, but the way they are obstructs your ability to wake up in the morning on time and to go towards your job in the right way that you need to. You need to be able to express your needs while still holding your own sense of ambition. But don't let your ambition wreck your relationship. And if your ambition wrecks your relationship, it might say something about your relationship. But if your relationship wrecks your ambition, it could also say something about your ambition, that you're maybe too ambitious and are not dealing with the nature of a relationship as it's supposed to be. These are the kind of things that Moon and Sun conjunct Venus are going to bring out when Uranus is in Taurus. An angular cusp is also similar, meaning that no matter what your sign is, your ascendant sign, if Venus is conjunct an angular cusp, then you are going to be dealing with that angular cusp as relates to, again, all these themes relating to Venus, to sexuality, to your ability to relate through some kind of gender, through some kind of expression, without taking it personally. Your ability to exchange energy. And we can kind of read what we just said. Venus conjunct Sun means that Venus is relevant to the spirit and inspirations, and so is what Venus rules by house. Venus conjunct Moon means that Venus is relevant to the personality and the building blocks of emotional volition, but starvation can reduce. It's like one deeply enjoys their emotional volition, but they enjoy it so much that they don't care if they bump their heads in relationships as long as they get this feeling of emotional wellness. So it's like if you have a job and you find out that there's an opportunity for you to expand your life, but you don't want to leave your lover who is attached to this city. Your boss says it's a great opportunity for you, but you need to go to Chicago, but you're living in like Mississippi or something like that. What's more important to you? The new opportunity for this job or this lover who is incompatible with that new position and reality? This is the kind of thing that happens where your emotional fulfillment might be starving your exact business sense. Just as an example. So whatever house Taurus rules is related to one's sense of self, comfort, and capacity to adapt and evolve, especially in business. And then we can see same sort of thing with Venus on a cusp. These themes are going to have to deal with whatever that cusp means for the individual. And in all these placements, Uranus can be connected to themes that lift the ground right out from under your feet in a disruptive yet necessary and potentially refreshing way. Let's just take a little checkaroo. Okay, let me just do a quick little phone zap here. Checking if anything important has gone down. Right. Cool. Now, can you guys see where I'm at here? Good. In order to fully conceive of what Uranus and Taurus means to the individual, what might we say about what Uranus and Taurus as it relates to humans on a collective scale? Okay. So we want to see what Uranus and Taurus means to the individual as it relates to your rising sign. First, we want to talk about Uranus and Taurus as it relates to humans on a collective scale. Now, this is my little breakdown. Taurus and Venus relates to resources, attraction, ease, comfort, wealth, and relationships of all sorts. Again, attracting abundance by what you intrinsically are and what you've been and what you've felt comfortable and familiar being ever since puberty. That's what Taurus deeply relates to. It's the ground upon which we understand and conceive of these things in ourselves. Venus through Libra represents how we relate with others based on what we are in Taurus. Taurus itself relates to how we express ourselves to others in a familiar way that we've always been and always done. If you have a good Venus, then you've probably had that figured out. Now Uranus and Taurus is enriching this thing that you've already got going on. But if you don't have a well-placed Venus, you might not know how to fulfill yourself based on familiar neurological patterns of your attractive abundance. And so now Uranus is telling you that you're working too hard. Work smarter, not harder. Work based on what you are in a way that can bring out the best of your fulfillment. So let's note that Venus, Mercury, and Saturn all rule earth and air signs and thus are deeply connected. If Saturn and Mercury are weak in the chart, the evolutionary soul appetites may erode one's wealth, especially at this period, if only for a bit during this transit. But this will be necessary for soul growth and emotional clarity and inspiration. You have to find some way to find emotional clarity, expansion, soul growth, and you might have to sacrifice a bit of a progressive scale of wealth that you've been building on in order to see what Uranus and Taurus can bring you, if that's important to you. Uranus and Taurus might just mean that you just, you learn subtly about things relating to your wealth and your intrinsicness by feeling a lack, feeling like you don't have the resources to express what Saturn and Mercury are trying to manage. And if they're not good in the chart, then you will lose wealth at this point. But if Uranus and Taurus is a dumb node in your chart, you might just not even feel that, and then you'll just keep going kind of thing. When we walk, we usually move one step at a time. Here, when Uranus is in Taurus, with regard to wealth and attraction, we may want to hop over Mercury's security and financial balance, as well as Saturn's patience and long-haul vision of just building on volition for its own sake, which is what Saturn's all about. So this is why the erosion of wealth can occur, because this person says, oh look, the boss just gave me an opportunity to go to Chicago from Mississippi. I've never been to Chicago before, but maybe it'll give me some money. I should just skip all of this and just develop a whole new self down over there. And this could be like a hop over Mercury's security that you might have been building all this time. But again, if you have a good Mercury and a good Saturn, then no matter where you go, you can hop over there, learn to instill these new things that Uranus and Taurus is kind of bringing you, while still keeping your financial balance and security intrinsically to you. Because whatever you develop in the material world is always just the tapestry of what the spirit is evolving through. So the erosion of wealth can occur, but it could bring more wealth through relationships and opportunities. See my Uranus transits video for more on that. So I guess I must have done a video specifically related to... I don't know if I meant that I did this already or that I'm going to make one. I don't even know. I made these slides a little while ago. So, let's talk a little bit of what Venus means at its absolute intrinsic state of being. This is our good friend Venus. In the Vedic sense, all of the planets are considered masculine, yang, forward-moving, unconscious agency principles. And the field, the signs, the houses represent feminine vessels through which the yang can experience itself. So the fields, the signs, are considered yin, while the planets are considered yang. And in this, you can say what you like about that, but generally all the planets are considered as deities. And of course, Westerners might think what I'm saying is a bit silly, but the Vedic people will get where I'm at. The Vedic mythos of Venus can greatly clarify this Uranus and Taurus transit and its effects to those who have significant points aspected to it and by it. In the Vedic mythos, Venus is considered the guru of the Asuras, who are considered demons. How can a benevolent deva, a god, deal in demons? Venus is a benevolent god. Venus is a benefic planet. We all must know of the beautiful abundance and prosperity and lovingness and water, nurturing, reflective water that Venus represents to all of us. By reflecting on the water of ourselves and learning about ourselves, we invoke an attraction abundance and good feelings of positive fulfillment based on what we intrinsically are. And what that intrinsicness of what we are relates to how we are on Earth as a biological entity, which needs food to survive, which needs healthy food, holism, love, emotional fulfillment. So, all of these things can often be related to materialistic desires, which are considered the realm of demons and asuras. I hope you guys get the funny tantric Zen thing happening here, where we all have to deal with the world of demons. In the Veda, demons are considered to be disparate parts of our own psyche. Just like in Zen, the Veda emphasizes clarity even towards the unsavory parts of our experience. Now, does that mean that Venus is unsavory as a demon? Not at all. It's actually, perhaps though, from a transcendental perspective, Venus is considered a little bit too savory if it's not balanced with the other compartments of the evolving soul. Shukra, Venus, bears a name which means sweetness. Who doesn't love sweetness? Yet, how painful when that experience of sweetness grows familiar and becomes salty and becomes an old, bruised apple that is only limiting us because we've been stuck on this same way of relating to our familiarity, relating to that which gives us a sense of fulfillment. How painful being bound by old patterns for an unconscious addiction to a memory. This deeply is showing what this Uranus and Taurus transit is trying to express for all of us. How can you redefine that which fulfills you by learning more than you ever have that which you are, that which does fulfill you? This is a time where you, if it's important to you, if Taurus is an important aspect of your energy field, especially right now, if you have any of the significant transits or dasha periods that we've talked about, then this is an important period for you, and it's a perfect opportunity to explore how you could redefine that which you are, to re-experience and get a different imprint from the biological, familiar nature that's come through you since you were young, in puberty. For most, this transit will unfold in basically one of two ways. So A is if you have never allowed yourself to enjoy your pleasures of yourself. B is in the past you've been enjoying too much of the pleasures and holding on to the demon aspect of Venus's desiring familiar expressions for the ventilating of its emotional energy. If you've gripped that a little too hard in the past, Uranus is going to undo it. Uranus might compel you. So let's look at A first. If you've never allowed yourself to enjoy the pleasures of any of these things, then Uranus represents that you've become crystallized in this area of life and it's obstructing you. Now, if you have never allowed yourself to experience the pleasures of the bed, your body, your senses, love and affection in relationships, true intimacy with your partner, and a confident sense of wealth and ambition in business partnership, if you've never really allowed yourself to enjoy and play with that, now Uranus and Taurus beckons you to be guided by the nose towards that ecstatic pleasure which will keep you whole on your journey, probably through a pressure which inclines you to indulge in pleasure, and you might indulge too much. Let's keep that in mind if this is you, and read down here to connect that. But before we get to this bottom bit, let's look at the other way which Uranus and Taurus might unfold. If in the past you have been compulsive and undiscerning regarding the bed, your body, your senses, your marriage partners, your erotic byways, your pleasures and luxuries, and your wealth, marriage, and business partnerships, and what you are intrinsically, again, in your biological familiarity since puberty. How that relates to your wealth, your marriage, your business partnerships, your ability to be a leader, your ability to enact authority when it's appropriate in leadership, while also being a supporter and an energy exchanger for someone else's leadership and authority when that's appropriate. If you've been compulsive and undiscerning regards all this, now Uranus and Taurus further plunges you into your neuroprogrammed patterns and addictions regarding pleasure and partnership. You may overindulge, you may underindulge. You may experience indigestion. You may challenge your values of soul satisfaction. Your familiar ways of sweetness may now have turned into salty torture. There's a particular metaphor regarding all this. I believe it relates to, I think it's Snow White, where Snow White is this beautiful bitchin' young maiden, and she's got this old granny who's like old and bitter and sucks, and the old granny relates to the saltiness of this Venus that was once so vain. The old bitter old lady used to look in the mirror when she was young and saw the beautiful Venus that she was, and she was like, oh, look how good I am now. And she enjoyed that for the moment, but now that she's older, she should be letting go of that vainness, because that sweetness, you've got to be able to let go of it in order to deal with business, to be able to deal with the best evolutionary appetites in the soul. And that bitter old lady wouldn't have gotten so ugly and gross. She would have graced well into her age if she let go of the vanity of Snow White and of seeing other people's glamour and not accepting that anything that she is at any age has its own intrinsic value. So the sweetness of the apple and of youth has now become this salty, bitter torture. You guys with me so far? Looking good. All right. So as usual, I hope you guys are enjoying this. Yeah. Now, I would like to read a little bit about ecstatic Uranus in sensual Taurus. Relates to a necessary ecstatic delving into the comforting familiar luxuries and indulgences of the realm of asuras, demons, earth powers, abundance, attraction, ego. In a lot of ways, Taurus relates to our ego and stubbornness, and it's one of the serpentine power structures of our deep inner will and willpower. So we need to deal with these indulgences, with being lovable, being loved, and being respected for the way in which we love. Whether you're a leader type person, whether you're a follower type person, or whether you're a leader who needs to develop the capacity to follow because you lead too much, or whether you're a follower who needs to lead because you follow too much. These are all the things that this is bringing out. Now, for a metaphor of this taken in grand scale, let's take a look at what Isabel M Hickey says about the transit of Uranus and Taurus. Right. Skipping logic. Yeah, okay, so some interesting things going on here. Now, Isabel M Hickey is a lady who has written this book. I mean, you can see it here, but I just want to show you anyway that I've got it. This is Astrology, a Cosmic Science. Highly recommended for any Western astrologers or anybody who's looking to get a Western sense of astrology. This classic was written in like the 60s. I got wind of it through Jimmy Page of Led Zeppelin fame. And it's usually very, very good, very strong. It's got just great, like deep ecstatic visions of what the planets mean as well as the signs. Now, she doesn't give us she doesn't say too much about the planets and the signs, because these are, as it's always said, these are a generational energy that everyone in a 7-year generation can see the pertinence and importance of. Anybody born with Uranus and Taurus is going to reflect in some ways the generational archetypes that we're describing here, which means an interest in in sexuality, in non-binary livingness. Non-binary being the ecstatic, formless expression of gender. Uranus and Taurus people are going to be interested in this kind of thing, and if their Uranus is well placed, usually it'll mean that they'll have to deal with gender and getting beyond it, but also living within it, using leadership when it's appropriate, following when it's appropriate, but not attaching themselves too much to any one directive, although attaching yourself when it is powerful and constructive and useful. These are things that people with natal Uranus and Taurus have to deal with. So let's consider the context. Now, Izzy Hickey is talking about people who have Uranus in Taurus. But it's also talking from a transit consciousness. This is what we're getting at here, okay? This is Isabel Hickey, Astrology, a Cosmic Science. We are looking at Uranus in Taurus. I would like to note that Isabel Hickey considers that Uranus is exalted in Scorpio and is in its fall in Taurus. This is debatable. The outer planets are very new, and I would like for everybody to consider that this is a burgeoning study in the world of astrology, and this is why I'm doing my part to ground this sense of where we need to go as researchers and observational scientists in the field of astrology in order to find some constructive use out of these new planets and what they mean. Because their symbology has not been digested as long as all the other planets, because you need a telescope to observe Uranus, which hasn't only happened within the last 100 years. But I digress. Isabel Hickey, for the sake of credit and clarity, Isabel Hickey does consider that Uranus is in its fall in Taurus. That's why we can see a bit of a negative expression through her interpretation of it. On page 185, she says, here in Taurus, Uranus is operating through Venus's field. There's an emphasis on learning by feeling rather than action. Taurus deals with the world of matter, and Uranus isn't interested in material matters. That's why it's frustrating that this flickering thing of like Venus and Taurus as this materialistic indulgence is coming through Uranus, which has evolutionary appetites that are beyond the earthly appetites. But it's almost like Uranus will shoot you into earthly appetites and you'll digest it, and you'll be like a hungry ghost with a fat stomach but a small neck. Uranus and Taurus will compel you to just try and get all the sensual indulgence that you can, and you'll suffer because you won't get enough. Because the hungry ghost has a big body but a small neck and can't get satisfied. It means that you will indulge, but you need to learn the meaning of that indulgence and how to discern how to put it constructively to the higher evolutionary appetites of the spirit. So Uranus isn't interested in material matters. It belongs to the intuitive and higher realms of thought. It is in the sign of its fall in Taurus. Isabel Hickey gives us a cool conspiratorial Illuminati sort of vibe here before Illuminati was a big thing. She says, when Uranus went into Taurus, the United States went off the gold standard. That was the last time Uranus was in Taurus. The banks were closed. The Depression set in, and the values inherent in materialism were challenged as never before in the country's history. It's very interesting that Uranus and Taurus pitted the world, especially in the States, into a state of depression and lack of luxury and material indulgence in goods. And now Uranus is back in Taurus again, and the world is seeing a huge change up because of this virus, and because there's almost like a reaffirming and a reintegrating of the stock market. The financial and fiscal understanding of the world is deeply being challenged right now, just like it was the last time Uranus was in Taurus. With Uranus in Taurus, note its relation to Venus in the chart. If the two planets are afflicted to each other, then there will be upsets and separations where love affairs are concerned. Isabel Hickey is saying that if your own Venus in your chart is not in a good relationship with Taurus, then when Uranus comes into Taurus, when Venus is in a bad relationship and is afflicted, is square, or is opposite, or is not inducive to what Uranus is trying to express. This might even be as simple as if Venus is in a sign that does not get along with Uranus's house and lord. Let's say if Uranus is in Leo and Venus is in Taurus. Uranus in Taurus is going to be tough because Venus in Taurus is very different from Uranus in Leo. Because Leo is the Uranus in Leo in the natal chart is expressing the highest, noblest sense of the self. But Venus needs to use Taurus for an indulgent material opportunity and luxury, which can kind of steal the sun's highest noble pursuits. But if Uranus is in Taurus, you need to be able to deal with the fact that your Uranus in Leo is now square to Uranus in Taurus, and that you have to let go of some of your nobility of your sun in order to indulge in the material world, but don't let go of the positive potentials of that Uranus in Leo completely. Now, with Uranus and Taurus as a generational aspect for all of us, unconventional attitudes can bring grief where marriage is concerned. Unexpected upsets could cause upheavals. I guess I should say, so let's just, unconventional attitudes can bring grief where marriage is concerned. This could be a person who needs to explore non-binary sexuality, and this could bring an upset in whatever sexual relationship that you've developed with the people close to you. You might just come to find that if you got married to someone through Libra, but you never married them for Taurus, if that makes sense, you've been relating to what they are, but forgetting what you intrinsically are in your familiar neurological puberty and hormonal patterns, which you've expressed and become familiar with since you were younger. You might have even repressed them in order to get married, because in marriage, it's a contract. It's a two-way thing. You can't always find a partner. If you find a partner who has the right finances and the right philosophy and the right values, everything except for emotional and sexual compatibility and deep unconscious energy exchange, then you might come to find now that all those other things are not as important as how much the person gives you a genuine sense of affection. Or this sense of affection might not be as important to you as the overarching marriage. If the marriage to your lover, for all the other reasons aside from your sexuality, is important to you, then you'll keep that marriage through this transit. And you might even learn how you can break down to your lover how to relate best at this level. And that's a really good place for this. But for anyone else who's been married, who got married and who didn't marry for a deep sense of affection, this transit might put you through a challenge in order for you to learn how you can better, again, adapt and relates to your own familiar sense of abundance and unfolding sexuality. So unconventional attitudes can bring grief where marriage is concerned. Unexpected upsets could cause upheavals, especially when there would be a Uranus transit to the natal Venus. Unexpected upsets could cause upheavals. So this is kind of, again, if there would be a Uranus transit to the natal Venus at the same time. So let's say if you have Venus in Scorpio, then Uranus in Taurus right now is giving you a hard time for this reason. Unexpected upsets could cause upheavals. If Venus and Uranus are harmoniously configured in the birth chart, there would be charm, magnetism, and the promise of a union that would bring great happiness to the individual. The creativity of an artistic nature would be strong as well, while Uranus is in Taurus in transit, and also for a Uranus in Taurus natal chart. So, yeah, okay, so we should do this one more thing. We've already talked a lot about all this stuff, but as it relates to Taurus's expression. So let's get one more concise bit of writing to contribute to all of this. We're going to hear from Astrology, Karma, and Transformation by Stephen Arroyo. It's written in 1992. As we can see here. This is a great book as well, another one that I highly recommend. It's a Western writer talking about the outer planets as it relates to karma and transformation from a very Jungian psychology sort of sentiment. Looking for page 121. I'm not going to dawdle too long here because we've already gotten quite a bit out. Well, yeah, I mean, I feel like we could go a lot here. But my intuition, ladies and gentlemen, is telling me that we are getting what we need. I was just reading what I had planned here as a note. I don't think it's as necessary as I thought because we've already described a lot. But I am going to make one statement from this book because, again, it's brilliant. But just a little blurb for any aspect of Venus and Uranus. This is typically meaning when Uranus is transiting Venus in your natal chart. I want you guys to consider that this does relate to Taurus because Taurus grounds what Venus is to the individual natal chart because Taurus is ruled by Venus. So, Uranus aspects that involve Venus are poorly explained in most astrological textbooks, according to Stephen Arroyo. So hence, before dealing with these specific aspects, we should clarify an important point about all Venus aspects. Venus aspects in the chart, as well as its sign position, show the capacity for conscious relationship with another human being. It's an important one. Venus aspects in the chart show the capacity for conscious relationship with another human being. The challenging aspects with Venus don't necessarily mean that one is not loved or that one doesn't feel any love within themselves or himself or herself. It simply means that one may tend to block the expression of love feelings, and that one might likewise inhibit oneself from receiving affection from others, for whatever reason that might be in the chart. And by blocking the affection you give to others, you necessarily remove the metaphysical, energetic wind of karmic retribution, which would cause other people to be used to giving you energy in abundance. Because if you constantly do it for others, you will necessarily attract it back to yourself. Now, if you don't have anything to contribute to others, or even if you don't find fulfillment through relating to others, it's likely that others will not find fulfillment by relating through you. And this is why it's so important for us to be, I'm Venus Atmakaraka, folks, and I kind of personally believe that if you can be a dang old beautiful little sparkly mirror to the needs of others, then they will be a mirror to your needs as well. And for you to find some way in yourself where you can do that for others, it will all come back around. And I think that that's why Venus is important to everybody and is useful as a necessary abundance collector on the road to whatever you want to do with all the other planets in your chart. Now, there's more that we could get into here, but I'm going to go with my inspiration, my feeling in the moment, and keep on rolling with what I have planned out for everybody. But we're basically at the end of our Uranus and Taurus dissertation. Lessons to gain. Tantra. Eat the treat. Roll it sensuously round your tongue. See it objectively as a gift from the divine. A very much do shake-up. Eat the treat. Allow yourself to indulge, but don't take the indulgence as with a scientific attitude. And when you, again, hopefully you guys can see this, it's like any scientist will tell you, do the experiment and save your skepticism until after the experiment is over. Do it. Just enjoy yourself. Enjoy your senses. Question your sexuality. Question the way that you relate to whatever lover that you have found. And digest whether you think that there are things in your life which are trying to show you that you can get a better grasp on how you listen as well as how you command the energy exchanges of your energy field. By indulging in your senses, by indulging in other people, flirt with people. You know, with the if you have a partner and you are finding that everything that I'm telling you right now is important to your self-expression and fulfillment, I think that the best thing for you to do is to communicate with your lover. It's part of what Uranus, as a communicator, an intuitive instigator, is going to try to do for you right now. And it kind of wants you to indulge and seek the best fruit for your needs. Now, if there is other ways of loving, other ways of relating, which your lover at present is blocking you from, doesn't mean that your lover is the problem. Your Uranus is teaching you how to relate in relationships. So if you communicate to your lover that these are concerns of yours, it'll probably be important to them too, because Uranus is in Taurus. Consider that. It's different from when Uranus is transiting your second house, because it's only you. Everybody right now is relating to Uranus and Taurus. And it might be a tough, tricky conversation to have, but if you feel that these things are important to you right now, I highly recommend that you communicate with your lover about it. And I'm inclined to say, like, again, be flirtatious and communicate with your lover that you want to find different ways of flirting with them. And in order to do that, that you have to either watch movies or go to things where you can find the consciousness that would enrich the relationship that you already have, with utmost earnest honesty and clarity with the relationship that you're already in. I cannot emphasize that enough if you want to keep your relationship. And as you continue, you go farther, you expand yourself, and you might come to find that the relationship you're in is incompatible with your basic desires. This could just be the nature of this transit. It's always tough to say. I'm no expert on it, but know that if you feel deeply that you're a monogamous person and you've made a commitment, a marriage that's worth, for all practical intents and purposes, that this person's worth sticking with, stay with them then. But use this time as an opportunity to further develop how you can relate with them at a very deeply intimate level and expand your own abundance through that inner richness. That's why Tantra. Look it up. See what it could bring to you in your relationship with whoever you're with. Discern how to make yourself feel happy, emotionally abundant, and loved by others. To feel you have support and how you can support others in a way that you've never done so far, if this time is important to you. If you feel like Uranus and Taurus is just causing you to be sad for your relationship status right now, just start discerning how you can make yourself happier in this relationship, or if you need a new one, whatever that might be. Now, like a man who was once starving, we might be inclined to overindulge in materialism during this period. It's like you're starving and then food is suddenly here because it's like you've been in a relationship all this time and now all of a sudden the world is your oyster, but you could still get candy sick. We must learn to take what we can, integrate it, and balance it out with our other soul callings once Uranus progresses into Gemini and further on. Always see past the smoke of the present moment. But don't escape the present moment either. This is Uranus at its absolute best. See beyond the smoke of the disillusion and the Saturn of this present moment. But don't escape the present moment and the opportunities that you've been developing so far. Plant your feet, smile, leave your mark on whatever Taurus relates to as a house. Move forward with lessons about finances, wealth, emotional and physical resources, etc., as Uranus leaves the heavy points related to your soul and moves on to Gemini in the next 7 years. That's what we're learning today, folks. Pretty good for 2 hours, I'd say. That took us quite a little bit to squeeze all that out. Now,